Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are tuning in, or if you are catching the replay. Welcome to Level Up Live for Limitless Leaders. Oh boy, what alliteration! You can tell that in my former life, I was an English teacher, right? But thank you so much for tuning in and for following the show, for all of your positive comments. People are telling me that they are really enjoying the information and the revelation in some cases and the focus on leadership and how to be an authentic leader, which was our first series that we wrapped up a couple weeks ago. Today, I am really excited about our next series. It's a shorter one, it's a three-part series on the importance of leadership development. Now, I was supposed to be joined by a special guest, Dr. Omega Wilson, but unfortunately, she has run into an emergency, and so we want to keep her in our thoughts and prayers. And hopefully, we will get her on before the series ends. We may have to add a fourth show just to make sure that we can accommodate her and her insights. I'm really looking forward to what she has to share. So, as leadership would have it, I am going to have to step up to the plate and continue this particular topic on my own. But that is all right because I am really passionate about this topic of leadership development. It is critical in our organizations that we have a focus on leadership development. And in actual fact, there are statistics out there that the development of leaders is very ineffective if it exists at all. And there is a prediction that 47% of people, of companies, feel that there will be a shortage of leadership or executive level skills in the future, simply because we are not planning and we are not preparing leaders for these leadership roles. I can't tell you all of the horror stories that I hear about the experiences that people have with leaders in our various workplaces and organizations. It is disheartening. It is scary. And as executive leaders, human resource professionals, we must do our part to ensure that leaders, future leaders, are being developed and existing leaders are also being developed. Just because you have a title does not equip you for leadership. I'm going to say that again. Just because you have a title, I will add, just because you have a degree or two or three, does not equip you to be an effective leader. There are other qualities that need to be honed and refined to make you effective. Yes, we may have some very natural, innate qualities that lend us to leadership. Yes, some people drift into leadership just because they may have been in their organization for a very long time. Sometimes leadership is given as a reward for longevity, and people look at it that way. I should get this promotion because I've been here for 10, 15, 20 years. This is my right. It's a sense of entitlement. But you're not equipped. You have never led anybody. You don't know how to lead anybody. You alienate the people around you. You don't know how to speak to people. You don't know how to delegate. You don't know how to plan your work. There's a skill set that is required to be an effective leader. How are people going to get it? It's not going to drop from the sky. It's not going to come from osmosis. We should not allow people to just be left to themselves because, as we note, uh, leaders, I found being a trainer for over 25 years, the people that resist training the most are leaders. They're the ones who are too busy to come to training. They're the ones, I don't have the time for this. But you need to make the time for it because it actually proves that their disconnection with the organization and organizational awareness because they don't even know that most people don't like them. Most people don't respect them. People aren't learning from them. They're not inspired by them. They're not sharing strategic direction. People don't know where they're headed. And so you end up with an organization that has either low morale, people who have checked out, they're not engaged, they're not committed. And yes, we can't make people be motivated, but as leaders, we are responsible for creating an environment for people to flourish and for people to feel connected and engaged and to feel that they are contributing meaningfully to the organization. I want to share a few points with you today on why leadership development is important and why it is necessary. And that reason alone is we must plan for the future and sometimes plan for the present. If we have people who demit office for whatever reason voluntarily, someone in a key role may resign. Do we have a pool of people that we can choose from to now put slot in or at least consider to replace that role? And next week, we're going to be talking more about succession planning and why that is important in our organizations. But the importance of developing talent, developing leaders, particularly, is crucial because we want to ensure that we're not chasing people away from our organizations. We all know the statistic that people leave people, not organizations. People leave their leaders and people leave their peers. If they are in environments that are toxic or they feel stagnant, then they're going to move on. Then they're going to try to find a place that is more suitable to where they are in their career and in their mindset and their growth mindset. That's why people leave. So let me share a few points with you this morning on leadership development and why it is so important. Let me just get my presentation up here. There we go. So this quote is actually one of mine that came out of a previous session. Where there are great leaders, there should be evolution and revolution. I've shared this quote a couple of times already because I believe it is critical. Leaders and great leaders should inspire and invoke change and disruption, positive disruption. Leaders should never be satisfied with the status quo. And that applies even in their own lives. Leaders should never be satisfied with, this is where I am in my level of growth and learning. As a leader, you ought to be current in your technical field. What are the latest trends? What are the best practices? What's happening out there? It doesn't mean that you have to apply every trend, but you need to be aware of trends and to determine, would this be suited for our organization? So you should be growing in your technical area, and you should also be growing in your personal development, identifying those goals and those gaps in your own person, in whether that's your mindset, whether that's your confidence, whether that's your speaking ability, your ability to lead others, to coach others, whatever that may be. You should have ongoing developmental goals for yourself as a leader. And organizations ought to create the backdrop for this to happen. And I'm going to share some tips on that in a few minutes. This is, I think, my biggest peeve with leadership development in organizations. And I mentioned it just a few seconds ago. Leaders that resist development. And this resistance can happen in many ways. As I mentioned before, they can say, I'm too busy. I don't have the time. These trainings are too long. And so, okay, you can't come to a 1-hour training. You can't come to a 1-day strategic planning retreat. You're so busy. But then how is that impacting the results that you're hoping to have? All right, so we shrink the training. We make it okay, we'll do a half day, we'll do a 1 day. Still don't have enough time. All right, then we'll do micro learning and we'll shoot you some very short videos. You don't have the time for that. LinkedIn offers some really great learning opportunities, and I love the reminders that they send, and they say do it in 30-minute blocks. And sometimes even that, you have to be intentional about your development. You'll never have time. Other things will always take priority if you don't make it a priority. Your development should be a priority. Why? You may run from these development sessions, but it will show up in your results. You're not going to be able to hide in the results. And what are the results? Either it is in actually getting your work done, or in your ability to build relationships, to collaborate, to get support, to get action from your team. What's the perception? What's your reputation? And sometimes we have to get ourselves in that place of self-awareness, as we talked about in emotional intelligence in our first series. That place of self-awareness where you are reflecting, where you make yourself vulnerable enough to ask questions. Ask your team, what do you need more of? What do you need less of from me? What could help me do my job better? What could you do as a leader? It takes great vulnerability to do that, but the results are amazing, because you're then going to get some valuable insights of things about yourself or your leadership style that you probably were not aware of. We may call those things the blind spot. And we'll talk about that a bit more. But that blind spot, those blind spots can be the thing that can cost you. And so when you are sitting in a session with your colleagues, when you are sitting in a coaching session, when you have identified perhaps a mentor and you can get this type of feedback about yourself, it helps you to grow and to improve and enhance your leadership skills over time. This isn't a one and done situation. Every year, you should have developmental goals that's pushing you, challenging you, enhancing you. This year, I have some development goals for myself. There are things and aspects of HR that I want to learn more about. And so I need to have that on my radar for this year so that I can ensure that I'm improving in that area. I'm increasing my arsenal, so to speak, of my toolkit as a professional. So the resistance is not helping you. The resistance is going to affect your results. So here are some tips that I'd like to share. And as we wrap up, because again, as I always say, these are meant to be informative, strong, but not long. Just something to help us to think, to challenge us, and to keep moving in our leadership journey. So, what are some ways that we can develop leaders in our organization? And I'm speaking to organizational leaders. I'm speaking to HR professionals, CEOs, and other divisional leaders that have leaders in your organization. And you already know that there are struggles. If you're paying attention, if you're listening to what your staff say, you know that there are struggles. You know that people are challenged by how some people are leading. You know this. But ignoring it is not going to make it go away. And then thinking that people are dispensable, people, oh, the job market out there, if some people are resigning, we'll just fill those positions. It's not just about backfilling those positions. It's about understanding why are people leaving in the first place. That's the important question. It's not about filling the positions. Why are people leaving? Why are people complaining? Why are people calling out? Why are people asking for transfers? These are clues. These are way, you don't have to send a survey out to figure that out. Just open your eyes and pay attention to what is happening in your organization and around you with your leaders. So the first tip is have the career goal conversation with your leaders. This isn't just for new hires and young professionals to ask them, what are your 5-year career goals? Where do you see yourself? You can ask that of a director. You can ask that of a vice president, because that's helpful information. Why is that helpful information? It tells you where they are or desire to be headed in your organization. And it tells you what developmental needs they may have to prepare for where they're going. It helps you to plan for if someone perhaps is about to retire or someone is perhaps struggling in an area. You can now identify a pool of people that you can now draw from, begin to prepare for future vacancies. It also helps you to see what people's interests are. Sometimes, and we make this mistake as leaders, we make assumptions about people that this is where they're happiest. They have no desires to do something else or to cross train or to transition into another area. I have friends and colleagues, and even myself, who have started in a particular area, but they transition into something else because their interests and their desires, their skill sets have changed. I don't want anyone to pigeonhole me and think that I want to be in HR for the rest of my life. Have you talked to me to ask me what my career goals may be, what my aspirations are? So we need to have the career goal conversation even with our leaders. Secondly, offer strategic leadership programs. As an organization, ensure that there is structured, strategic leadership development for all levels of leaders. So, what are the levels of leaders that I'm talking about? So, we have who we would call high flyers or high potential leaders, people who you can look at them and they're in a non-management role now, but they have the potential to transition into management. There should be some preparation for persons who are going to enter leadership. Then we have the newbies, right? Or the supervisors, frontline leaders. We need to prepare them because at that level, they have their unique challenges. Most often, they are promoted out of the ranks, so to speak, promoted out of their peer group. And that presents some challenges. Sometimes people challenge their leadership. They push against and they resist their leadership, and they need strategies on how to deal with that. Sometimes it's a change in workload, a change in responsibilities that they may struggle with. How do I find the balance of getting all this work done and doing all of this strategic work that I may not have had to do before? I've just focused on the technical stuff and I've mastered the technical aspect of the job, but this leadership aspect, the people part of this thing, I'm not accustomed to this. I don't know how to do this. So we need to help them as they are leading in the supervisory or lower levels of leadership in the organization. Then we have mid management. And again, they have their unique challenges as well of navigating, managing other people, managing other leaders, right? Being a leader of leaders, being having to lead and focus in on what these top down demands are coming at them, and how to find the balance and inspire people to do and to monitor and not micromanage or hover over people and getting them delegating, right? So there are different levels of responsibility there. Then you have your senior leaders, then you have your executive leaders. And so at each level of leadership, there's a different level of exposure, there's a different level of skill that is required to be successful. So organizations need to offer those strategic leadership development programs. And you don't have to do it all in-house, but if you make sure that there is a budget, then perhaps you can send these leaders to conferences. You can engage a leadership coach. You can offer or send enroll them in some online program. It's not to say that you have to do everything in house and you have to build everything, but you need to think about how you are going to prepare leaders. Remember, we want results, and we want results not only in the company's bottom line, but we want good people results as well. The third strategy to develop leaders in your organization is to consider leadership coaching and mentorship. This is so important because these are structured accountability relationships, relationships of guidance and inspiration and aspiration that provide curated opportunities that target specific development needs. So, yes, we can all sit in a course, and guess what? Most times we may be preaching to the choir. Most times people may come away saying, well, that was for so and so, but that was not for me. But when you can target specific development needs for an individual and then have them work in a one-on-one or a small group coaching session that targets these specific areas, then there is more likelihood that there will be success in turning around particular behaviors and hoping that they get that revelation. So coaching, again, is very targeted. It's an accountability relationship. There are assignments that are given. There's challenges. And the coach is going to ask them, what did you do based on what I asked you about the last time and what we discussed in our sessions. Mentorship is the same way. Mentors are people who we look up to, we admire their experience, we admire their journey, and mentors don't have to necessarily be older and more experienced in that way. They can be more experienced in a particular area. So you may have a technical mentor, a financial mentor, something in an area that you want to grow in. That person doesn't necessarily have to be older than you or that much more seasoned in terms of years of experience, but expertise, right? And being able to inspire and challenge you to do some different things in specific areas. And finally, this is important. When we are developing leaders in our organizations, we need to incentivize development and hold leaders accountable. What does that mean? Then we can incorporate development goals into our performance reviews, compensation structures, and consideration for advancement. So what am I talking about here? We need to build in to performance requirements, performance goals, that we also have development goals. So as a leader, how many training hours is required? Or maybe you're required to attend a seminar or a conference. Maybe you are required to join an association. As an organization, maybe you pay for it, but now you hold them accountable to report in. What have you been getting from this? What have you learned from this? Tie it into their performance, tie it into bonus structures. It shouldn't be just on how much money you saved, but it should also be on how you have developed yourself and the results that we can see as a result. We don't want this to just be a checklist thing where you can say, well, I attended that conference, but the complaints are still the same. We have to hold people accountable. Maybe if you want to be considered for that next level leadership role, we need to see, how have you developed yourself? What programs have you participated in? What meetings and other initiatives that the organization has been putting out that you've gotten involved in? Have you participated in community service if the organization offers that? Are you mentoring anybody? Right? We need to ask these questions and we need to hold them accountable. If you're ready now to be a director, to be a senior VP, then what have you done to develop yourself? How have you partnered with the organization to grow yourself personally and professionally? This is critical. And until we begin to hold leaders accountable, we will continue the dysfunctional cycles and toxicity that we see in our organizations every day. We want to make our organizations places that people want to come to work, where they want to contribute, leaders included. Leaders need to feel supported as well. Leaders need to know that they're not, especially mid-level managers, they're kind of squashed in the middle there. They have lots of ideas, but what I've noticed as well is that organizations, top tier leadership, don't want to talk to anybody below senior or executive leaders. Your mid-level leaders and your frontline leaders and your non-management staff have just as much to contribute. I talked about this in our first series. You got to get out of your offices. You got to get out of some of these meetings. Walk around and talk to people outside of your senior leadership team. This is critical to getting a full breadth of understanding of your organization, your organizational awareness. Very important. So as I close, remember in our series, we always give a coaching challenge and we talk about what is coming next. So your coaching challenge for this week, what development goals have you set for yourself or fellow leaders? So you may be a leader of leaders. Have you held your leaders accountable for setting some development goals for themselves and creating the structures in your organization to provide or make that development accessible to them? Think about that for yourself. What development goals have you set for yourself? And are you making moves toward it? We're almost at the end of the year. There's still time. You can enroll in something now. You don't have to wait until January 1. You're going to hear me say that a lot. All we have is this present moment. You can make things now. There's nothing magical about January 1 in any given year. I hate to burst your bubble. There is nothing magical about it. Nothing about you is going to change because the date changed, because we roll into a new year. What will change is when you are intentional about the change that you desire. That's it. So I challenge you, if you haven't already, set some development goals. If you have set some goals, get something done toward that. Take an action. When we take action, it moves us toward where we want to be, and it inspires us to keep taking action. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you're watching this. If you're catching the replay, thank you so much for stopping your scroll and tuning in to this session. Next week, we're going to talk about the role of leadership development and succession planning. Cannot wait to talk about that. This is important. We have to do a better job of preparing for future leaders and vacating roles. So I am, once again, Simone Elbow from the Limitless Life. Very happy to be here in your company. I see some of my friends tuning in. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining, and stay tuned for our next session next week. Have an amazing day.